Welcome to worship at First Unitarian Church of Rochester, New York. I invite you to join me now in voice, body, and spirit as we sing our opening hymn, led by our house rock band, Orange Sky.
1, 2, 3, 4. Keep on learning. Soldiers, keep on pouring. World, keep on turning. 'Cause it won't be too long. Powers, keep on lying, while your people keep on dying. World, keep on turning, 'cause it won't be too long. I'm so darn glad he let me try it again. That's my last time on earth I lived a whole world of sin. I'm so glad that I know more than I did then. Gonna keep on trying till I reach my highest ground. Teachers, keep on teaching. Preachers, keep on preaching. World, keep on turning, 'cause it won't be too long. Lovers, keep on loving, while believers keep on believing. Sleepers, just stop sleeping, 'cause it won't be too long. So darn glad she let me try it again. It's the last time on earth I lived a whole world of sin. So glad that I know more than I did then. Gonna keep on trying till I reach the highest ground. 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 Till I reach the highest ground.
Welcome to First Unitarian Church of Rochester. We are so grateful that you are here today and this week. We have so much going on. Here at First Unitarian, our mission is through spiritual connection and community. We listen deeply to others and ourselves. We open to wonder and transformation, and we serve with love and humility. I'm Shannon Foose, membership coordinator, and we have a wonderful group of folks in worship today. We have Reverend Sherry Halliday Kwan, Reverend Margalie Belazaire, Sheila Shu, Stacy Watson, Orange Sky that you just heard, Arson, Tommy Snell, Lynn Kinsman, and Rich Wilder. Behind the scenes, as always, we have our wonderful ushers, greeters, and tech support who are making everything run so smoothly and come together. We also have a pastoral care associate. Today it's Ed Tilley, and if you'd like to reach out to him, you can do so in the chat. He's here to help you with anything you're needing and connect you with Reverend Margalie if that is something that you need. We have so many wonderful opportunities this week to connect with each other and the larger community. Today, this afternoon, please join Reverend Sherry from 4 until 6:30 to hear from the Indigenous voices within Unitarian Universalism. On Thursday morning, we have our 149th Rochester Interfaith Thanksgiving service, which started as one of the churches with our own. Little pride there about this wonderful service. And if you haven't gone, please go. It's wonderful. And then after that, at 1 o'clock on Thursday, all are invited to join Reverend Libby Moore as we celebrate Thanksgiving together. And you're going to see old friends, new friends, and just friendly faces all around. Make us feel connected during this COVID time. Links will be in the chat, but they're also in the newsletter and on social media. And one last thing is, as always, as every Sunday, we have time for conversation and connection after service. So please join us for that. Now, let's all take a deep breath together as we settle into the sacred time and place. Please join me as we say our chalice lighting words. May the flame we now kindle inspire us to use our power to heal with love, to help with compassion, to bless with joy, and to seek liberation in the fullness of community.
A number of years ago, Travis and I spent about 5 months in central New York, where I taught for a semester. When I had mentioned that we enjoyed hiking to a colleague of mine, he promptly recommended a trail to us. Each Monday, he would ask whether we had tried it or not, and each week I had to admit that I hadn't yet. You see, I prefer to hike when the weather is nice, and that autumn had brought a string of cold, wet weekends. Finally, after making excessive excuses from my perspective for several weeks in a row, I decided that I would try that trail, rain or shine. Saturday brought another cold, wet day, but Travis and I put on our rain gear and laced up our hiking boots nonetheless. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time we arrived at the trailhead, but it was still very wet and dark. It was even darker once we got under the trees, and the only sound was the water dripping onto the hood of my jacket. Even the animals didn't want to be out in this weather. It wasn't easy going, partially because the trail was steep, and partially because the wet leaves on the trail were slippery. I will admit that I was feeling quite sorry for myself by the time we neared the top of the trail. Grumpily, I trudged into a clearing and noticed that the trail ended at the cliff edge. Just as I approached the edge, the sun broke through the clouds and bathed the earth with brilliance, picking up the autumnal oranges, reds, and yellows far below in the breathtakingly beautiful valley. The raindrops on branches glittered like diamonds in the sun, and I found that my dreary and dark mood had vanished with the rain, and that I, as Wordsworth wrote so long ago, was surprised by joy. And isn't that why we come to church? Sometimes our mood is dark and dreary when we sit down to the service, and then suddenly, after a hymn, some words during the sermon or a reading, or just being in community, we are surprised by joy.
Messed up tonight, I lost another fight. I still mess up, but I just start again. I keep falling down, I keep on hitting the ground, but I always get up now to see what's next. Birds don't just fly, they fall down and get up. Nobody learns without getting it wrong. I won't give up, no, I won't give in till I reach the end, and then I'll start again. No, I won't leave, I wanna try everything I won't give up, no, I won't give in till I reach the end, and then I'll start again. No, I won't leave. I wanna try everything. I wanna try even though I could fail. Try everything. Try everything. Try everything. Look how far you've come. You filled your heart with love. Baby, you've done enough. Take a deep breath. Don't beat yourself up. No need to run so fast. Sometimes we come last, but we did our best. I won't give up, no, I won't give in till I reach the end, and then I'll start again. No, I won't leave. I wanna try everything. I wanna try even though I could fail. I won't give up, no, I won't give in till I reach the end, and then I'll start again. No, I won't leave. I wanna try everything. I wanna try even though I could fail. I'll keep on making those new mistakes. I'll keep on making them every day. Those new mistakes. Try everything. Try everything. Try everything. Try everything.
Oh, Margalie, it's so good that you're here. We're just about to start planning our Greater Good service. So
Oh, I'm glad to hear that because, on Sunday when I made the announcement, I was sitting there wondering, okay, I can get some of the gist behind it, but I don't fully understand it. Can you tell me more about what Greater Good is?
oh, right. I'm so glad you asked. You're definitely not the only one who doesn't know or who could use a reminder, I'm sure. So the basics of Greater Good, it's part of our holiday traditions here at First Unitarian. It's the first of our 3 sacred services in December: Greater Good, Solstice, and then Christmas Eve. And with our Greater Good service, what we've been doing all leads up to this moment, but what we've been doing is really important. So what is that? Community organizations local to Rochester apply to our Greater Good Committee, which is made up of an intergenerational panel. There's always a youth on that panel, but it's not just youth. There are also adults, and Sheila's even on that panel. And so then that panel narrows it down to 3 organizations, and then children vote. So they, around the same time that lots of adults in our community are voting, our children also get to vote. And they select 2 organizations, and those organizations then split the contributions that our community comes together to give as a gift in December. Anyone
Wow.
else?
Yeah, and on the congregation side, we ask people to just sit down with their families and take a real look at what they're planning to spend on the holidays. And that is everything from gift giving to travel and feasts, and to really think about what is necessary and what is maybe a little too much. We take a look at that number and we ask people to cut it in half and consider giving half of what they would have spent, perhaps gratuitously, on gifts and travel, on these organizations that our children have selected, living more simply so that others can simply live. The idea is that we really want people to change the way that they approach the holidays. It's not simply giving up what they don't need, but to say maybe we can do something differently. We don't have to do our holidays like we've always done them.
Yeah, Margalie, one of the things that it's really helps our families to do is to have a different frame for helping to grow our UU children and youth, that we don't need to look at consumerism and the cultural norms around what the holiday is, that we have our own kind of UU magic, that it comes because the children actually lead us, which is really the story of the Christian story, right? The story of being born in a stable. It's about this light and love that comes from very simple means and changes the world. And that's the thing that we try to embody with this project with our kids.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm so glad I asked because, I kind of had an idea that's what it was, but it's such a beautiful idea and such a beautiful concept, and how well it seems like First U has been executing it. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know so much about it. I'll have to share this idea with other people.
I invite you now into the spirit of generosity. Each week, members and friends of First Unitarian generously contribute to our offering, which helps to sustain and grow our church community as well as the local community. Each week, we split this collection with a community organization. We give away 50% toward partners helping those in need and working to create a more just and loving world. This week, we are sharing the plate collection with Veterans Outreach Center. Founded locally in 1973 by returning Vietnam veterans, Veterans Outreach Center provides employment assistance, job training, counseling, housing, advocacy, and other support services to veterans and their families in our community. There are a variety of ways to contribute, including Venmo and Simple Church. Please give now as you are able.
The poet Mary Oliver writes, I go down to the shore in the morning, and depending on the hour, the waves are rolling in or moving out. And I say, oh, I am miserable. What should I do? And the sea says in its lovely voice, excuse me, I have work to do. Please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation.
Spirit of life and love, source of waves and shores upon which water and tears crash. I confess that waves mean something different to me now than they used to. COVID, yes, but also lakes instead of oceans. That does not stop the water from lapping at my feet. Gently now, if not always. The waters of this earth, teeming with life, vast and mysterious, has a way of colliding people together. Though beautiful, the water with wind and rock can be cruel. May all who are buffeted by violence, fear, and uncertainty, or simple loneliness and grief, be surrounded by the loving embrace of those in this sacred gathering. May we seek to be ever more healing, ever more loving, growing as your waves gently carry us. And though unthinking, the water with wind and rock can be beautiful. May all who are a part of the interdependent web of life find places to thrive and grow. May we delight in life's mysteries and gifts, finding them where we least expect to. May we know that even as balance brings challenge, life's abundance is sweet. May it be so.
In the early 2000s, in the context of the aftermath of the September 11th attacks and a budding war on terror that brought drone warfare to foreign lands, to places far away from here, and surveillance that looked not unlike those same drones to our own communities closer, to student groups, to communities. In that context, Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, experienced a great resurgence of popularity. This play that talks of Puritans, of those whose religious convictions grounded their daily rhythms in life and drove them to seek a new home on American soil, on this continent. This community in The Crucible, well, this is Salem, not far from Plymouth, not far from the territory upon which we map American origin stories, although we know that our collection of communities did not spontaneously erupt from one place. But this story in The Crucible, well, it's a story of our ancestors. We as Unitarian Universalists descend specifically from those early colonists, those who claimed this land and built upon it a theocracy, a way of being in community, guided specifically by the religious convictions that these new pioneers had every right to dictate the ways that this land should operate. Many of you know this story of the Crucible. Many of you know this story of the Salem witch trials. It's a deeply serious one, a deep and challenging period of American history, one chapter among many like that. But the Crucible in the early 2000s, as it experienced new waves of being put on in high schools, is cemented in my mind for one scene, Amidst all the horrors of the ways in which people can treat each other badly, there's one character that stands out for me. The wise man Giles Corey, who is so dedicated to truth that he allows himself to be killed as opposed to double back and give up what he knows to be true and right. Giles Corey, upon facing the threat of torture, being crushed by stones, hoping that he will proclaim that one among us rather, is a witch, he continues to call for more weight as each stone is laid upon him with increasingly crushing burden. He yells ever more quietly, more weight. It's a gripping scene and a strange one. Who are we that we descend from people that would not only kill through crushing burdens, but call for it? What are we to do with all these extra stones? That we descend from the Puritans links us not only with Salem, but with the Pilgrims who, though different than Puritans, one being loyal to the English crown, the other group not, though different, shared many religious similarities, shared the pieces that link us as Unitarian Universalists to them. The Pilgrims, too, bring us a story fraught with stones, a story fraught with challenging ways that human community chooses to be together. And it's this week that we dive into this strange story of what has come to be called Thanksgiving, but most decidedly could not have been and was not at the time. Those Pilgrim ancestors of ours, complicated as they may be, and that our collective claiming of is fraught with our own individual and personal identities, most certainly. Those Pilgrim ancestors of ours washed up on the shores of Massachusetts, of what is now Plymouth, but was not called that then, with fewer than they had set out with a ship full of promise and hope, a new way of governance, a new way of committing to being in community with each other. But deep fears and uncertainties, and most decidedly grief and loss. Not all had made it through that Atlantic voyage. And on the other side, those who waited on the shores to see what uncertainty might wash up for them in their next chapter. The Wampanoag. A people who are ancestors for some of us, but for many of us, we do not claim a direct link. The Wampanoag waited not with a sense of complete unknown. European colonizers had been washing up on the shores for 100 years. And at that point, 2/3 of the indigenous peoples in New England had died. In the 10 years prior, smallpox and other challenges introduced by European settlers had brought uncertainty and grief and loss to the people on the shores. And so that meeting was not first contact, but an uneasy alliance, a place of seeking out what might be possible despite everything we know about the ways in which humans could be dreadful to each other. This truer story of the Thanksgiving service is only one facet of the holiday that is civic and yet takes on religious proportions that's coming on Thursday. But Thanksgiving's been reimagined many times. That 17th century festival that celebrated the harvest and simply gave thanks for a partnership that allowed these new colonizers to live. That feast, well, it wasn't called Thanksgiving then, but Thanksgiving, that idea of a harvest festival of giving gratitude, that idea of a time in this cyclical, seasonal way of being in human community, well, that was a centuries old practice for both people on the shore. The Wampanoag, like the indigenous people local to this land, the Haudenosaunee, had for centuries practiced a way of turning toward the harvest, of giving thanks for the cycles and systems that produce food that would keep us nourished through the winter. And the Puritans, or the Pilgrims, they too had a celebration of Thanksgiving, though celebration is perhaps not quite the right word, because in that Giles Corey way of being steadfast, they came from a culture and a people for whom devotion to God meant solemn fasting, a gratitude that looked like deprivation, only temporary, to remind you all of what you might not have if not for the grace of God. Given the choice, I might choose a harvest festival over a solemn day of fasting, but I can see why both are important. And in many ways, the American story, as it's gone through different variations over the 4 centuries since that first festival together, in some ways, those positions have swapped. Dominant American culture pretends as if Thanksgiving, if we can abandon this myth of easy friendship and erases the genocide and mistreatment of indigenous peoples that continues today, becomes simply an easy way of demonstrating small gifts, an easy way of showing gratitude for all that you have. Something that connects you with those closest to you, the systems of home and family. But too easily we slip into cycles of consumerism and outdoing your brother-in-law's turkey from last year, or perhaps that's just me. While the Wampanoag find that Thanksgiving morning can now only in the context of the last 400 and really 500 years be commemorated as a day of mourning. A day in which the truth can only inspire grieving. A day in which telling the truth cannot be done with integrity without sadness. What are we to do with all of that weight, all of those boulders? So these are 2 or 3 versions of the Thanksgiving story, but there have been many in between. I've talked a number of times about our ancestors, those who link us to this sacred and yet secular at the same time holiday. And it was a Unitarian minister who first proclaimed that that harvest festival of gratitude was to be called Thanksgiving. In 1841, a Unitarian minister editorialized a historical document. Let us pray for you ministers, that the commentary we offer might be grounded in truth, and that when we just can't help ourselves and we say something that holds too much of our opinion, that we are leading always towards liberation, always toward love. Now, that Unitarian minister at the time, he probably thought that that's what he was doing. And yet it helped drive a national myth in the context of national fracture during the Civil War that led Abraham Lincoln to declare Thanksgiving a national holiday, one that was meant to celebrate the victory and mass death at Gettysburg and craft a vision of unity over difference that erased that death and proclaimed a vision of easy friendship. I can understand the temptation. But in our 400 years, we've found lots of ways of celebrating this day together. Our neighbors to the north, those other Americans, which is not to say that Canadians are like those of the United States, but simply that when we claim America for our own national identity, it is simply geographically incorrect. Canadians too, like other countries, celebrate Thanksgiving. And in the last few hundred years, their stories too have been reclaimed and reforged no fewer than 4 times. This holiday has a slippery way of reforming itself. And so we get to, just as we do each and every day, make choices about how we celebrate and what we choose to center. The Indigenous writer whose relationship with her own communities has ebbed and flowed, grown when she chose to make intentional choices to center those relationships. Robin Wall Kimmerer, she writes and she quotes another writer, Joanna Macy. And you may be thinking, Reverend Cherry, why quote another quote? How could we possibly track? But here's the truth of it, is that all of our ideas are connected. All of us are building on the work of another. And it is new writers, but women in particular, non-binary femmes, who I find are in the habit of making clear the intellectual and relational lineage upon which these ideas and sentiments form. So I do this intentionally to know that when we bring in wisdom, we do not do that alone. When we specifically name and lift up the voices, it allows us to more clearly honor this web of interdependence. So Robin Wall Kimmerer, she writes, Joanna Macy writes that until we can grieve for our planet, we cannot love it. Grieving is a sign of spiritual health. The day of mourning that the Wampanoag commemorate on the beach of Plymouth, the candles lit and the songs sung and the people who gather around Plymouth Rock to say that this fiction that suggests both an easy friendship and the mysterious and complete erasure of contemporary Indigenous people. That commemoration, that grief, is a necessary part of spiritual integrity. We cannot pretend to reclaim Thanksgiving without giving attention to that which is true and continues to harm. But Robin Wall Kimmerer continues, but it is not enough to weep for our lost landscapes. We have to put our hands in the earth to make ourselves whole again. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even the stories, the half-truths, the dangerous fictions have nourished us into being. We cannot erase that truth. But that ancestral call within our religious community to add on more weight, it need not be overly burdened with carrying around continued fictions. We can set down the stories of old that are not true and wrestle instead with the boulders that surround us currently. The truth that gathering, as we have often done, makes us less safe this year. The truth that telling false stories erases Indigenous voices. The truth that though the truth hurts and life is challenging, it does not need to crush us. Into that crucible, we find ourselves now wondering what it is like to cook our celebratory meal. What ingredients do we have to put into this pot? Robin Wall Kimmerer continues. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return this gift. Joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return this gift. Joy and suffering, as we know, ripen on the same vine. Truth-telling need not come at the expense of joy. As we tilt into Thanksgiving, we're given an opportunity to reclaim this holiday, this holy day, this day that points us to the sacred connections that bind us all together. We find moments of wonder and joy not by pushing out the harsher truths. No, that truth-telling need not hold us back. Our monthly theme of Hold Us Back feels particularly cruel in a year where we're asked to do something differently. But when I put it that way, it doesn't seem so bad, does it? How might we not be held back? How might we be set free by this chance to do something different? To celebrate anew? To know which gifts life gives us? And how do we return this gift? So this Thanksgiving, I invite you all to center your household. Perhaps that is you. Perhaps it is you and your pet turtle. Perhaps it is you and your adult children who you didn't expect would be there and yet somehow are. I invite you on this sacred holiday to lean into the reclaiming, to know that asking for more weight is not a call to be crushed, but that in that story, our ancestors in the crucible were not only those who killed and were killed, not only those whose religious convictions and devotion to a singular God made their approach to life, quite frankly, a little dreary, but also the witches. Also those who saw magic and possibility. Also those who knew the natural world invited us to see the ways in which we are all connected. So this Thanksgiving, I invite you to say yes to the moments of magic that arise at your doorstep. Each gift, it comes in the form of a pumpkin, or stranger still, a can of pumpkin, Or more miraculous, a can of pumpkin that's been turned into a pie that somehow made its way to your doorstep. I invite you to say yes to the invitation that is a loaf of bread. I invite you to say yes to the little magic that is this dish passed down to you from your grandmother's grandmother. And yet you know you make the best version of all your family. I invite you to say yes to a microwave version of that thing that you had once and always wondered if you could make for yourself. We say yes to these moments of joy, of wonder, of miracle. And into that, I invite you to go a little deeper than you have before. If you are someone who does not have much of a connection to food, and I know this is challenging for lots of folks in lots of different ways. For some, it's emotional. For some, it's relational. For still others, the food available to us is the food that we can manage to get on our table, and we don't have much choice in the matter. But I invite you to, as deeply as you can, with as many connections as you can. You need not spend all day doing it, though you're welcome to if you'd like. But even 4 or 5 minutes would do. Something that you eat that day, assuming you're not fasting, something that you eat that day before you put it into your own closed and yet wholly dependent system, which is to say, before you put it into your mouth, before you ply open that mouth like Plymouth, before you do that, to settle in and give thanks to all the hands and all the species and all the connections that picked and prepared that food. I invite you to name the ways in which that food came into your home explicitly. Perhaps you bought it at the store. Perhaps it was delivered from a food pantry. Perhaps another member of your household brought it and you don't actually know how long it's been rattling around the bottom of your produce bin. As best as you can, describe how it got into your home. As best as you can, describe how it got from the ground to your mouth. If you grew it yourself, the story becomes more simple. If it comes with a sticker saying which country it was first grown in, that becomes much more complicated. It's a simple task, but one that is at the very heart of connecting us to systems of gratitude that invite us to live more wholly, with both a W and without, I mean that word. But to be invited into systems where we can name places to give thanks. This is a spiritual task that I set before you, a small spiritual practice for Thursday. It can be an annual tradition, a daily one. Try it once. Try everything. On this sacred day, and on all those that need to be reclaimed, reknown, may we know that truth-telling need not crush us, but also that we need not call for more weight. Let us set down the boulders of extra burdens and proclaim a joy and abundance that life, even in its universal balance, gives us. I see that my video has gone out strangely. what a call. What a call to not proclaim more weight. It is good to be together, friends. Good to be here on this holy day. Go, connect with your food. Connect with those whom you most love in ways that keep us safe. And know that this Thanksgiving, you are in my prayers for more love, more life, and good, nourishing food. May it be so.
Please join me now in singing our closing hymn, Part in Peace. Part in peace the day before us, praises sing for life and light. Are the shadows lengthening o'er us? Bless thy care who guards the night. Part in peace with deep thanksgiving, rendering as we homeward tread, love and service to the living, gentle memory to the dead. Part in peace our voices raising, in thy presence always be. This the worship and the praising, bringing peace to you and me.
Please join us in our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Go in peace, friends. Go knowing that to choose joy over despair is not because you have your head in the sand. No, joy is what the earth gives us daily. Joy and truth-telling are our ways of returning the gift. Hold nothing back. Go in peace and return these gifts. Amen.